Hello, everyone. It's good to be with you, whether it's morning or evening or afternoon where you happen to be. It is mid-afternoon here, perfect timing for me. If you are interested in lighting a candle for the start of our circle, I invite you to do that right now. I'm lighting one that came from Greece. When my wife and I lived in Italy, we worked primarily with refugees, migrant workers, migrants, and asylum seekers. And this candle was a fundraiser used by an anti-trafficking group in Greece at the time. And so they asked that every time we light it, we think of them. And so every time I light this candle, it reminds me of all the work that was being done in that way. That's not our focus today, but as we light the candle and you light yours and we call ourselves together. Yeah, my name is Tim. I live on Long Island. I'm originally from Iowa. I've lived in Germany and Hong Kong. Recently moved here, or recently, it's been 7 years now, moved here from southern Italy where we lived in Palermo. And I worked in Palermo, Trapani, and Marsala, did a little circle. My wife is a social worker, and we worked with refugees and asylum seekers, mostly out of Western Africa, out of Ghana and Nigeria. But even before that, back, I don't know, 30 years ago, when I was a young seminary student, I had a pastor's wife, a widow of a former pastor, say to me that you might as well just get out of your mind that you're going to be creative. Every pastor has three sermons. And they just preach those three sermons over and over and over again. They turn to other passages, they use other stories, they try to do other things, but sooner or later, they always come back to those three sermons. And I try not to do that, but truth be known is today is just one of those topics that I think sits kind of at the core of my soul. And so I will use my language because it's the language I come out of, but I don't think it's merely a Christian concept. I don't think it's merely a Judeo-Christian concept. And I think it's maybe what we're talking about today is applicable to us regardless of whether we have any particular belief system. So I hope that you'll find something in it that resonates with you, even if my language comes out of a tradition that's not your own. I use the word peace a lot in my church. I'm really attentive when I speak the word peace to clarify that for me, I think it's important to remember that peace isn't just the lack of conflict. That if we look at peace as being the lack of conflict, we miss a huge portion of what we're intended for and what we're really made to experience. Instead, I'd argue that peace is when everything and everyone is in perfect relationship and communion with everything and everyone else. From my religious perspective, I look at the Garden of Eden story in the book of Genesis as laying out a desire for humanity where there is perfect, intimate, ongoing, interactive communion between humanity and divinity amongst us as humans and between humans and the world order, the whole cosmos around us. And for me, the idea that we don't experience that in its perfection is the trauma that is daily life and that is fair. I actually call in when I'm in my preaching, my definition of sin is anything that inhibits or prevents that perfect, interactive, ongoing, intimate communion between humanity and divinity and amongst us as people, and between us and the entire world order. Because I don't think we're intended to be disconnected from the rest of the world order as well. That perfect wholeness, relational intimacy, I believe is what we're made for. And when we don't experience it at some level, we're living into something we're living in the midst of something that's foreign to us. So today I really want to think about peace in that sense. Peace that is this perfect, interactive, reconciled relationship amongst us, between us and the world around us, and if you believe in it, between us and divinity. And I think that's an incredible gift that humanity's made for. And I think that it's an incredible responsibility since we don't experience it in its fullness to work toward it and to strive to experience it more fully. In my language, we are in sort of a middle ground between a perfection that was described to us at the beginning of time and a perfection that I believe we will one day experience in all of its fullness in a recreation, in a new heavens and a new earth, in a new experience of reality. And as I look at the world around us and what's happened in the last week and what's happened in the last 6 months and what's happened over years that we are now experiencing, it seems to me that we are in desperate need of that kind of peace, in desperate need of reconciliation, of justice, of unity, of wholeness, of healing, of hope, of future. To use words out of Hadestown, my daughter is studying to be a stage manager. So we see a lot of Broadway shows since we're close enough to be able to do that now. There's a phrase in it that says, "To the world we dream about and the one we live in now." And we hold kind of ourselves in that middle tension between what we hope and look forward to and look toward experiencing, and realistic about the one we experience right now, which is so full of pain and darkness and suffering, even though there's a lot of joy and celebration in the midst of it. In July, I got to go back to Naples. I lived in Naples for a while before we lived in Palermo. And there's a section in Naples that's often called La Sanità. It's a section kind of in a valley in between what used to be some wealthier sections, a section of Naples that is filled historically with crime and poverty and sickness and death and destruction, cemeteries, and historically, and not only historically, corruption and the mafia. When I lived in Naples just 10, 15 years ago, the La Sanità was a section that people didn't really go into. The entire time I lived there, I was never once in that section. When I went back to Naples in July, it surprised me that things were changing in that area. People were going there. There were concerts and there were art shows and there was a new theater, and normal people, if you will, who didn't live there were starting to spend time in that region. And I went back to start looking at why that was, and found out that transition really started about 7 or 10 years ago with a priest named Antonio Loffredo, who came in with a very specific understanding of his job and his call. And he said that when it comes to the mafia, when it comes to evil, when it comes to darkness, don't fight it, cure it by offering something beautiful in its place. Don't fight it, he said, cure it by offering something beautiful in its place. And there's a time to fight. I'm not arguing that. But as I watched what's happening in that entire section of Naples, it struck me that something beautiful was happening. And that maybe that's an inspiration to us. There's a lot that we can't fight. There's a lot of the darkness that we can't change, but we can put something beautiful in its place. And today, I'm hoping we're going to be able to do a little bit of that as we enter into our time around the labyrinth. And here's how I'm going to offer us the invitation to do that. When our music starts, I'm going to start us with a little prayer that's a non-sectarian prayer. It's one I use consistently in my labyrinth work. It's not a religious prayer. You can offer it to deity. You can offer it to your own conscience. You can offer it to the labyrinth, whatever is comfortable for you. And then I'm going to offer the opportunity for you to take your labyrinth walk today in three very specific sections. The first section, kind of meditating and wondering about the words to that prayer, which I'll have printed on the screen for you if you want to come back to them. The second section, when you get to the center of your labyrinth, I invite you to just put your hand over the center and imagine yourself pouring into the labyrinth all of the peace and wholeness and reconciliation and beauty that you have to pour in to the labyrinth, that together we can, if you will, charge our space. And then as you leave the center, to invite you to just absorb and drink up any of that you need. I have this belief that the labyrinth is bigger and older and richer than any of us, and that you can be the biggest energy vampire you want to be, and it's not going to take everything the labyrinth has to offer. So if you need healing and you need peace and you need wholeness and you need space and you need justice and you need all of those things, feel free as you come out of that labyrinth on your walk out to imagine and to allow yourself to absorb everything that you need, knowing that we have poured into it and that it had already inside of it a quickening that was there. So pour into it all that you have to pour in when you're in the center, and drink deeply from it in your coming out. I'll close us at the end with a poem, and then we'll take some time and review and give you opportunity to discuss. The poem I'm going to close our time with before we have our time to share is a poem that for 24 years the rabbi at our local synagogue has closed our interfaith service on 9/11 with. And Rabbi Jody is her name. She's the rabbi at the, I point because it's down this direction, the rabbi at the Reconstructionist synagogue just down the road from where I'm sitting right now. And she has closed every single one of our interfaith vigils for 9/11 with the poem that I'm going to close our time with before we spend some time in discussion together. As you're doing that, one of the things that I do, you do you, as they say. I hold my labyrinth in my dominant hand, and I trace it with my non-dominant hand, my left hand. And the way I do that is I actually hold my hand still and I move the labyrinth to trace it. So the labyrinth is moving, which keeps my brain very busy, which allows my inner self to kind of rise to the surface a little bit, since my brain is busier trying to make sure that I don't forget what's going on in that sense. So I invite you to warm your labyrinth up, run your hands around it a couple of times, center yourself in. I encourage you to focus your attention on the area of your heart, taking a deep breath. Imagine that breath flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable to you. Not too fast, not too slow. You have a positive, peace-filled, love-filled, wholeness overflowing experience. Tap into that experience and let it settle into you. Not just remembering it, but bringing it into the here and now. Re-experiencing that peace and that wholeness and that justice and that hope and that presence. Allowing yourself to sink into where you are and where you need to be, wherever that is at this time. And as you find your way towards the entrance of your labyrinth, get prepared to walk. Would you join me in these words? Lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from hope to joy. Let peace fill our lives, our world, our universe. Peace, peace, peace. I'll see you in 9 minutes. And then all that has divided us will merge. And then compassion will be wedded to power. And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both men and women will be gentle. And then both men and women will be strong. And then no person will be subject to another's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life creatures. And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again. Peace, peace, peace.